Well, it's good to be with you tonight and share with you in this time together and your mission team, and just to keep us all on point about where God is leading us and what He wants from each one of us as far as making disciples for Him. I really appreciate Brother Jack introducing our new sermon series this last Sunday, which we will continue throughout the month of May and into June, on how Jesus changes your life. When you receive Jesus, what difference does it make? What difference does He make in your life? And I really appreciate the courage that Brother Jack demonstrated this last Sunday in the message that he presented in dealing with a very hot topic, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, and the fact that when Jesus comes into your life, He changes you. If you've been a homosexual, He changes you. He changes you into a heterosexual. He changes you from any form of immorality that you've been involved in when you receive Jesus in your life. And so I really appreciate his courage. You know what? In the days to come, it's going to take a lot more courage, it looks like, isn't it? We're going to appreciate courageous men more and more who will stand up and speak the truth on these difficult issues that are confronting our society and the day in which we live. I want to talk to you a little bit about that particular issue, the whole issue of same-sex marriage. This could be called a PG-13 presentation. It's only to our adult mission teams. And so I want you, though, to be aware that I'm going to address something that could be uncomfortable, but I don't believe it's inappropriate. In fact, I believe it's absolutely necessary. I want to tell you about a few friends of mine. I have a friend, and when he was very young, he was introduced to pornography, and he began to use pornography to help him fantasize. And this became his sexual orientation. I have another friend, as a young adult man, he began to hire prostitutes, and this became his sexual orientation. I have still another friend, and as a young adult man, he began to make phone calls to women who would help him fantasize, and this became his sexual orientation. I've still even got another friend, and as a young man, he began just to date women, but use them to help him fulfill his fantasies. In fact, he explained to me how he would pick women when he went into a Starbucks or some other place that he knew would help him fulfill his fantasies. And this became his sexual orientation. I have another friend, as a young man, he began to use children, I'm sorry to say, to help him fulfill his fantasies, and this became his sexual orientation. And then I have another friend, and as a young man, he began to use other men to help him fulfill his fantasies, and this became his sexual orientation. I have one friend, perhaps more than one, who has done all of the above, and all of the above still appeal to him to this day. Now here's a question that I have based on what I just shared with you. Why would anyone conclude that only one of my friends above was born with their sexual orientation and that the others were not? Why would anyone say, you know, I'm really proud of one of my friends for coming out of the closet and declaring their sexual orientation, but they would not say that about all of my friends that I mentioned? Why would anyone urge tolerance for my friend with the same sex attraction and be intolerant toward all of my other friends? Why would anyone conclude that some of my friends are disoriented in their sexual identity and need help to change, but not all of them that I mentioned? To be absolutely consistent, why wouldn't you take a position that all of these men are wrong and need to change their sexual orientation? Or why wouldn't you take a position, if you want to be consistent, that all these men are right and we just need to accept them all for who they are and encourage them to come out of the closet? You know, for the record, I have had fantasies about a lot of things that are morally wrong and things that I'm not proud of. I started having these fantasies when I was a young man, when I had way too much freedom. Yes, I was molested by an older stepsister when I was 9 years old, and that could possibly explain where one of my fantasies began. But you know, I have fantasized during the course of my life, especially when I was young, about a lot of things that I've never experienced. And I've personally acted out some of those fantasies and found them to be very exciting in the moment and very pleasurable. You know, I still find those fantasies tempting at times and appealing. Should these fantasies and my desires define my sexual identity? You know, it's important that we as believers become discerning. Paul said it like this in 2 Corinthians 10:5, and speaking to the church, and I want you to take this to heart. He said, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. You know, the Greek word that is translated imaginations in that particular verse is a word from which we get our word logic. Imaginations, casting down imaginations. Imaginations are bad logic that supports false ideas and conclusions. And as believers, as brothers and sisters in the Lord, we must be able to see the bad logic in the arguments of those who support that which God says is immoral. We should love all men, but we must reject their bad logic and then encourage one another to avoid any participation in what Paul would call the evil deeds of darkness. In fact, this is what he said in Ephesians 5:11, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. You know, the majority of the world that we live in appears to be buying into these false ideas and false conclusions and the immoral conduct that these ideas support. We must not become discouraged in well-doing. We must not faint. We must not give up. We must not give in. We must keep our eyes upon Jesus. You see, we must always remember, no matter what we go through and whatever age we live in, we must always remember that Jesus was born at a time and in a world that is very similar to ours. He changed His world one person at a time by becoming a friend of sinners. You see, we're called to follow Jesus, and we're called to love sinners like my friends as we stand against the flood of evil that is sweeping over our land. If we will all do our part, it will make a difference. No, I can't promise you that God is going to bring another revival that's going to change the very fabric of our society and change the social and moral fabric of our nation. But what I can tell you is, if we will all do our part, it will make a difference. There will be souls in heaven that would have been lost forever if we will all do our part. This is why we exist. Let us be faithful. Let us be faithful in standing against the flood of evil and the false ideas that men use to support that evil. But at the same time, let us be faithful in being a friend of sinners until Jesus comes again.